Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, Britt and I celebrate the 30th anniversary of Tombstone. This story takes place in a time of chaos and lawlessness, but through that context, we discover the right reasons to fight, who our true enemy is, and the power of having the right friends beside us. I'm your huckleberry. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me for this ride out into the American West, my Tonto to my Lone Ranger, Britt Mooney. Hey, Britt, how you doing today?
Who you calling we, Kimosabe? You remember that joke? There's an old joke where the Lone Ranger and Tonto they're riding out on the range, whatever, and they're surrounded by a tribe of violent Indians. And the Lone Ranger says, "Well, I guess we better get ready to fight." And Tonto goes, "Who's we, Kimosabe?" No, man, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Excited to jump into Tombstone. This is, I guess, technically the 20th anniversary of this movie is this year. Yeah, it came out in 93.
That's 30 years.
I can't do math. This is the 30-year anniversary of Tombstone.
Yeah, we didn't even plan it that way.
Yeah, it just came out. And actually, you sent me a list of movies at the beginning of the year, and as you do, you keep adding to them.
We were talking about Westerns. We hadn't done a Western. Except for possibly The Man from Snowy River, the Australian Western, but not an American one.
Yeah, I don't count that as a true Western.
Yeah. So I was like, well, here's some Westerns, and this is definitely a guy movie, man. I mean, I don't know a guy who doesn't love this movie.
This came out when I was in college.
Yeah, me too.
Instantly became quoted for the next 4 years.
Absolutely.
I'm your huckleberry.
And actually, you even sent that to me while you were watching it.
I did.
So we're going to talk about Tombstone today. And one of the things that you noticed, Britt, was the volume of high quality actors in this.
Even guys before you knew who they were.
Right. Michael Rooker was in it.
Right.
Who's, I mean, everywhere now, it seems like. Billy Zane, Billy Bob Thornton, little chubby Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, he was.
Even Jason Priestley, the 90210 shows up.
He was given some space to Kelly for a while so he could go do a Western.
And even, going farther back, you've got, Terry O'Quinn's the mayor. He's Locke in Lost.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, it's no Western without Charlton Heston.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, or Sam Elliott or Robert Mitchum doing the narration.
Sam Elliott might be one of the coolest people who has ever walked the planet. Like, I don't know what kind of person he actually is, but every time I see him in a movie, I'm like, that's like so much cooler than anybody could ever be. I don't know how he does that, but.
Yeah, we probably should put Big Lebowski up on the list. Because he's the little mentor guy there towards the end, right?
Yeah.
Sam Elliott shows up in that movie. The dude abides.
Yeah, but Bill Paxton.
Michael Biehn.
I mean, Michael Biehn. The guy who played the William Curly Bill. He was a character actor.
Powers Booth. Yeah.
Powers Booth. Yeah. I mean, just they were recognizable names. There's a couple big stars, but there was a lot of them were recognizable movie guys.
Yeah.
Even Dana Delaney. So I was just reminded. Oh, and by the way, just a little note of trivia: Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner came out not long after this, and
Not as popular.
and was not as popular. And it was funny because they were trying to compete. They were literally trying to compete because I think Kevin Costner wanted to do a Wyatt Earp movie, but didn't like the script for Tombstone or something went on. And so he went off to do his own thing. And this movie was huge. This movie was so huge.
Well, I think on the spectrum, on one end, you've got Young Guns and Blazing Saddles. On the other end, you've got Wyatt Earp, and Tombstone's nicely in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of Westerns. And we didn't even mention Lowell. Thomas Hayden Church was in this.
Yeah.
Lots of dudes. Thomas Hayden Church from a movie that I've seen that Britt hasn't. Britt has not seen Sideways. At least not yet.
Not yet.
So I think this is the first movie that we've discovered that I've seen that you haven't. That's, more than 5 years old. So, Britt, we talked, and we've been talking for like an hour. We've been emailing and texting. It's pretty easy when you look at this movie to be like, oh yeah, we love Tombstone. Whether you're in college or rewatching it again, it's like, man, this resonates. We get something out of it. But when we look at the why, because we were talking and some of the challenge was, well, it says this and it says this. It's like, yeah, but that's not really why we like the movie. As Corey, who talks, he says he frequently watches a movie to see where the sermon can come out of it. Like, that's all, not like a good sermon point isn't always why we love the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're looking at this, kind of trying to blend those two together, to dovetail them together, when you take why do we love this movie with what can we learn from it, what did you see?
Two things, twofold. I think that it's kind of a revenge story, and we like that. There's so many examples of that. But I think at its core, it's not just a revenge story, because I think revenge stories, if it's just vengeance, it's not great character, right? Like at some point that breaks down.
And I tend to not like the vengeance, as we discussed. Like, don't like the Northman, didn't like the Terminalist.
Yeah. So what movies do and what stories do is they try to give us a character who is dangerous but wants peace. They're giving us a character who's dangerous, who maybe has a history of danger and violence and has skill in that area, but is trying to choose not to. Like, that's an interesting character to most guys. Like, I know I could be dangerous. I know I can be violent, but I'm choosing to be a peaceful person. I'm choosing not to be a violent person. And this is, again, going to one of my favorite guys, Jordan Peterson talks about like we all have to admit to ourselves we are capable of great violence and evil. Like, in order to be a good person, you have to admit to yourself that you are capable of being the monster. That you have to admit that to yourself. And so Wyatt Earp is one of those sort of people, and we love these characters, whether it's John Wick or the Liam Neeson character in Taken, and we love these characters who end up on a sort of vengeance journey, but they really. They're not enjoying vengeance. They're not enjoying the violence as much, although maybe at times they do. They just happen to be good at it. But really, life puts them in a situation where they have to fight for other people, where they have to save their daughter, where they have to, get revenge on their dog, whatever it might be. And we can understand that. Oh, okay. Well, now that justifies letting the danger out because it's for a good cause. And so I think that's one of the elements of this that they're really playing into with Wyatt Earp. and to some degree, Doc Holliday. And I think the second reason we like this movie a lot is because of the relationship between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. This we didn't really argue, but we were just having a discussion on Tuesday about, is this Val Kilmer's best role? Like, he carries this movie as an actor. Yeah. Like his and the acting is kind of average for the most part in this movie. But his acting as Doc Holliday carries this movie
for sure.
And he's been in a lot of great movies, and maybe The Doors is up there with this as far as great acting that Val Kilmer's done. But we love that relationship between these two men. And I think that's another reason why men love this movie, because these guys are committed to one another despite their faults.
So you talk about Wyatt and you talk about Doc Holliday. But if I ask you, who are your two favorite characters in this movie? Because I have to say two, because if I just say favorite, obviously it's going to be Doc Holliday.
Right.
But if I say, okay, who's your next favorite character in this movie? It's not going to be Wyatt. Right?
No.
Who is it?
Oh, it's Ringo.
For sure.
Hands down.
Which is interesting. Yeah. Johnny freaking Ringo. I had one of my RAs in college was John. So we called him Johnny Ringo even today.
Did you?
Yeah. 30 years later, we still say, hey, have you heard from Johnny Ringo?
I will say there's one line that annoys me is where he says, he quoted a line from Revelations. It's not Revelations. It's the revelation. That's bad. That's bad writing. I mean, I don't care if they're Christians.
It's that trope where the bad guy always knows some piece of
rare,
obscure scripture.
Yeah, but it goes with this character. And I was talking before about how he's self-aware of his own evil.
Yeah.
He's the opposite of Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp knows he's dangerous but wants peace, and knows he even likes to be dangerous. Like, he knows he could be that monster.
Yeah.
And Johnny Ringo has just become the monster that Wyatt Earp could be.
I've already done the deal.
I've done the deal with the devil.
The Faustian play. So when we talk about this movie, what do we love? Why do we love it? It shows us three rights, basically. It shows us the right reasons. Why do we engage in battle, in warfare? It shows us who we're battling in Johnny Ringo. And as we're going to talk about how that's actually a reflection of who we can become. And then finally, we need to have the right allies on our side, the right friends, companions as we do the fight to keep us from sort of, not to go Star Wars, but from going to the dark side.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with, the synopsis of the movie. Wyatt Earp, he's a lawman. He's retiring, wants to go make some money, set down some roots with his brothers, sort of build the family, build a fortune. He's like, my fight is done. I've done my duty. I'm quitting. And we see that very early in the movie. And basically the rest of the movie is how he gets drawn back into the battle, the fight over right and wrong. And what we're going to discuss is how that battle is very infrequently against actual people external to us and frequently about our internal fight of who we are becoming. But we see this scene early in the movie where he gets off the train right after, interestingly, right after Ringo's quote from Revelations about the pale horse with death riding on him and hell's coming after. And we see Wyatt Earp come out. We see him, soothe the horse, and then a U.S. Marshal shows up. And in his response, we see sort of our desire of, I just want to take it easy.
Mr. Earp, my name's Dake, Crowley Dake, U.S. Marshal for this territory.
Forget it. I'm retired.
Excuse me?
I said forget it. I don't want the job, and that's final.
I don't think you understand.
No, you don't understand, Marshal. I did my duty. Now I'd like to get on with my life. I'm going to Tombstone.
I see.
Easy on the grain.
Striking rich.
There you go.
Well, all right, that's fine. Tell you one thing, though. Never saw a rich man didn't wind up with a guilty conscience.
I already got a guilty conscience. Might as well have the money, too. Good day now.
And I think with these three guys that we're really focusing on, Wyatt, Doc Holliday, and Johnny Ringo, they're all capable. They're all competent. They're dangerous. They can be dangerous. But what we see is Wyatt doesn't want to do that anymore. He's like, my fight's over. My days are behind me. I'm done. I just want to make a little money, find a little piece of dirt. And that's not necessarily bad, but what we see, especially early in the movie, is he is a selfish man who's using his skills and talents in service of the self. Mm-hmm. Right? Even that great scene with Billy Bob Thornton, and he, disarms, jerk that smoke wagon. You gonna do something? Or you're just gonna stand here and bleed. And it's not out of a sense of right or wrong. It's a sense of, I can take advantage of this situation and put myself in a fortuitous situation.
Well, and that's kind of how the movie opens. So the movie opens with this sort of discussion and narration by Robert Mitchum of the West, the lawlessness, the chaos. And what I wrote down was, what kind of person will you be in a time of chaos? What type of person are you going to be when chaos abounds? Are you going to be the opportunist? And that's who Wyatt Earp has decided to be. He's decided to be the opportunist. I'm going to make money. I'm going to make money off of the chaos and the lawlessness. And we're going to get to why that's important in a second. You can be the villain, just spread the chaos, right? Just be a part of the chaos, which is who Johnny Ringo is. Or you can be the hero. Or you can be someone who fights the chaos, who fights the monsters, who fights for other people. You can be that person. But he thinks he's already been that person. He said, well, I've been that person, and what do I have to show for it? I've got a wife who's a drug addict. I don't have my family around me. I want peace. I've had chaos. I've had hurt. I've had pain trying to do what's right. And I think all of us can relate to this. How many of us have tried to fight for what's right and felt like we failed, or felt like nobody listened, or felt like as much as we fought, they still went down the bad road? As much as we pleaded and begged and stood up for what's right, people still did what was wrong. Yeah. And people still get killed by cops, even though we say don't kill, we think it's wrong or whatever, like this, the chaos still abounds. And so there's sort of like a giving up to being the hero. And so you've only got two choices after that. You can either be the villain, and we're like, well, I don't want to be that.
I don't want to be Johnny Ringo. He shoots.
I don't want to be Johnny Ringo. So maybe I'll just be the opportunist. But here's the thing: you don't get to compromise. You don't get to be the opportunist, because the opportunist will eventually become the monster.
Right.
Like you don't get to make that decision. You don't get to be on the fence. What is it in the Karate Kid? Karate do, karate no do. No maybe, like squish like grape. You don't get that. like this in between thing where I'm just going to live for me in a world where people are hurting. It doesn't work, because you will just eventually become someone who's hurting other people. That's what you're going to end up becoming. And so, but that's who we see. And I think. But just to relate to people, I think we all can relate to that. We've all been at that point where it's like, especially if you have worked in nonprofits, or you've worked with the homeless, or you've worked in prisons, or you've worked really fighting on the front lines of brokenness and hurt people. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And you're like, well, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And I'll just do it for me. I'll just make money. And what was it in The Wedding Singer, where he goes to the bank and he was like, I want a job. I just want money. I like money. Or it's like he's like, it seems to work for other people. Why can't it work for me? And David deals with this in one of the Psalms where he's like, I see the wicked prospering.
Yeah.
And I'm doing what's right and I suffer. Like, what the heck? God, of course, that Psalm doesn't end there, right? Then I went into the land of the living. I mean, I went into the house of God and I saw and I understood their end. I understood that there's more to life than the moment. So anyway, so that's what we see with Doc Holliday. I mean, with Wyatt Earp, and I think that I actually think it's a really cool little scene there. I love that. It says a lot to me.
What we see is our choices. Like, he's checking out of the battle, checking out of the fight, doesn't want to be on the law side. But when you're living this, what he's seeking is a little comfort, little security, little stick my head in the sand. If I ignore it, it won't bother me. I'm not trying to get in the way. I'm not trying to do this. Like, even when Curly Bill was, high and shooting everything, he even tells the marshal, don't go out there. Just let him burn it off. Meanwhile, like, I don't know how somebody didn't die. Like, he's shooting at people, shooting into the buildings.
Right.
I'm pretty sure somebody did at least take a bullet somewhere. And it's our desire for comfort, security. It could be, you don't need to be necessarily in ministry to feel it. It could be with your kids. It could be getting overlooked for the job. You're like, you know what? I just got, passed over for a promotion for the last time. I'm just going to coast, do the bare minimum, go home, enjoy my salary, do the back. It could be with your wife, could be with your kids. I just want a little bit of comfort, a little bit of peace. If I could have sex on a routine basis with the wife, if my kids would just behave enough to go to college, then they can do whatever they want. You just want a little peace and quiet because you're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm thinking of if Wyatt Earp's out there, his weeks and months away from home pursuing fugitives and living on the prairie of the West and, days and days on horseback. Like, it's an uncomfortable way of life. But our pastors at church is starting a series basically our story's not finished. And we know that God isn't done with us because we're still above ground.
Right.
But so many of us was like, oh, well, I've done especially people who are getting older. Mm-hmm. I've like people who are literally retired. And be like, oh, I'm retired. Especially if that job was your security, your identity. Like, now what do I do? One of my favorite stories is George Mueller, who did so much work for the orphanages in England but always wanted to be a missionary. And so at the age of 70, he finally got to go on a foreign mission and had over 20 years. He had a full career after 70 of being a missionary. And I think part of it is our desire for comfort, convenience, a little peace and quiet, a little cash on the side, not having to extend ourselves, work too hard. But the other side of that is fear. We're afraid we're afraid that if we stand up to Billy Bob's character, that he is going to pull that smoke wagon and fire down on us, and and we won't be able to fight that. We won't be able to handle it. We won't be able to sort of manipulate. We won't be able to control the situation like we see Wyatt and Doc Holliday doing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of my favorite stories along the lines of, quote unquote, retiring, a friend of mine, Tim Turner, who I've known for a long time, is in his early 60s. He was in his early 60s a few years ago. And salesman his whole life. I mean, loved Jesus, served in church, served in all sorts of different ways in the community. It wasn't like he was just doing a job, loved his family, raised a great family. And he's in his early 60s when his mother dies. And he's coming back from the funeral. He's driving back from the funeral with his wife and a couple of his kids. He's got 5 total, but only a couple were in the van at the time. And he's coming back from the funeral and he says, when we get back, I'm quitting my job. I can't do this anymore. I have to do something else. And he started an organization called Satisfeed that gives food to the hungry. And he's more alive now in his 60s and has more purpose now in his 60s than he ever did living what some people would have called a great American life, And I love this guy. He's inspiring to me. It's like the story is it's almost like his story is starting. As like when other people would try to retire and just get the boat and go fishing or
play pickleball,
the RV, and do
go
golf. Go see the Adirondacks or something. He's like, no, the adventure is starting.
Yeah,
and I love that spirit. I love that heart, because that's Jesus, man. That's the heart of Jesus. And again, some people just want to do whatever they do, but I just love that. Like you're saying, like, is it fear? Is it, this is what I'm owed? But I think people come more alive with purpose than they do sitting around fishing. I'm not saying fishing is bad. It can be really fun, especially with a couple guys. But what I'm saying is that people come alive with purpose, and that's where we're getting to with the right reasons. What were the right reasons? And that's what I was getting to with the choices of what we do during chaos. We have options, and who are we going to be? Are we going to be the kind of people? Because because he keeps trying to like compromise with the cowboys who are kind of the face of evil here. He keeps trying to compromise. Let's live and let live. We don't want any trouble, yada, yada, yada. But, he ends up having to stand up for the sheriff or the marshal who gets killed, the Fred guy.
Yeah.
Because the Fred, even though he tells the guy, just leave him alone, he's like, somebody has to go out there, and I'm the guy with the badge.
Yeah.
And the other sheriff isn't the law, right? He's in the pockets.
He's
of
aligned
the
with the cowboys. Yeah.
And then Wyatt steps in, but because the enemy won't let you, like I said, you don't get to make the choice. The enemy won't let you just live in the middle. The enemy will make you submit to itself one way or the other, or you'll have to stand up against it. And so then you have, we're going with the right reasons. There's a great conversation when Virgil finally says, that's enough.
I told you we weren't getting involved.
You got us involved when you brought us here.
Now, you hold on a minute, Verge.
Hold on, nothing. I walk around this town and look these people in the eye. It's just like someone slapping me in the face. These people are afraid to walk down the street, and I'm trying to make money off that like some goddamn vulture. If we're gonna have a future in this town, it's gotta have some law and order.
Please, Verge, don't do this to me.
It's got nothing to do with you, Wyatt. It's got to do
with me. I'm your brother, for Christ's sake. God, I don't believe this. Talk to him, will you, or hit him? Oh, God, don't tell me.
Like you said, Wyatt, we're brothers. Gotta back your brother's play. Just did like I figured you would.
All right, now you listen to me. Both of you. The first time in our lives, we got a chance to stop wandering and finally be a family. Now, this is trouble we don't need. You saw what happened to Fred White?
We know what we're doing, Wyatt.
Okay, fine. Say you're right. Say you don't get yourself killed. There's something else. All those years I worked those cow towns, I was only ever mixed up in one shooting. Just one. But a man lost his life, and I took it. You don't know how that feels, Morton. Believe me, boy, you don't ever want to know. Not ever.
There's a line from, it's not scripture, but it's U2, so it's close, right? From their song Peace on Earth. And it says, they say that what you mock will surely overtake you, and you become a monster, so the monster will not break you. And that's what we see, like our choice and Virgil's choice and their choice, why it went up. I told you we weren't getting involved. Well, if you don't get involved, you become the monster because you're going along with it. You're saying that's okay. He's like, I'm not going to make money off of their pain and their suffering.
Right.
We can do something about it, even if it costs us something, whether that's getting shot or whether, Morgan, and he talks about his loss of innocence of shooting someone and all this. And Wyatt wasn't willing to pay the price to go through that once again.
Yeah. And I can understand that. I can understand not wanting to get in the fight because there's a couple of reasons, but first, let's just say that the choice is you're going to pay something either way. It's going to cost you something either way. You don't get to be the opportunist. That's the lie of the middle choice. I get to profit off of this, but no, you actually lose your soul.
Yeah.
That's what Virgil is trying to say in his own way. And in a very much cooler guy than me, Sam Elliott sort of gravelly voice, he's saying, I'm losing my soul, Wyatt.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't take us into New York City where there aren't any opportunities and we just get a regular job at a factory. Like, that's not the peace you want. You want the kind of peace where you get to make a lot of money, but that opportunity happens in chaos and confusion. And we're making money off of their pain. And that's not right. And I can't do it anymore. And I have the ability to do something. If I don't do something, then I become, like you said, I become the monster.
Yeah.
And I can't lose my soul. I might lose my life, but I don't want to lose my soul.
Right.
And that's a bigger cost.
Well, that's what Jesus says, doesn't he? To say, why fear man who can take your body?
That's
fear
right.
God who determines what happens to your soul.
That's right. He can kill your body and send the soul. There are bigger things at stake than just my physical life. There's my soul is at stake, and that's an eternal thing. But I get not wanting to get back in the fight because when you're in the fight, it costs you stuff too. And so you're trying to avoid that pain and that cost. And you come face to face, even when you're fighting the right fight, you come face to face with your own inadequacy and your own evil. And that's where we get Johnny Ringo. That's where he's the foil. He is who Wyatt could be. And he's afraid of that. And we should be afraid of that. We should be afraid of becoming that person. So, but that doesn't mean that we then do nothing. It means that we have to be honest and say, I have to be honest that I'm capable of this. Because if you're not honest, then you will become that, right? If you're not, because it's a lie, and lies just lead you to that monster guy.
And that's really where the battle is.
Right.
We talk frequently, Paul talked about it. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and authorities and principalities. It's basically the dark supernatural forces of the world. We like to think it's for whoever disagrees with us, whoever doesn't have the same political bent or societal bent, or, who views things differently. But really, all those things do, and as you mentioned, the chaos, all that the chaos does is it illuminates who we are or who we are becoming. Are we becoming like Johnny Ringo, who does a deal because he's like, I have these gifts, I have these talents, I'm going to use them to promote myself, to take care of myself, to protect myself? Or can you do like Wyatt does and use them in service for justice, for the law? But again, not fighting the enemy outside, but the enemy that you're trying to not become, right? The temptation is it's very easy to become a monster.
Mhm.
That's why Jesus said, consider the plank in your own eye.
Right.
What monster am I becoming? Is it a monster
That's so good.
of judgment? Is it a judgment of division? Or is it a monster of division? Is it a monster of hypocrisy, of condemnation, of shame, of regret? We all have certain bents and certain temptations, the dark side of the coin of who we could become.
The beauty of that verse, and it's kind of a pet peeve verse to me sometimes because people don't quote the whole thing.
There's no
The
more.
verse
That's the end of the chat. That's the end of the Bible right there.
The end of the Bible is don't judge because you got a plank in your eye. No, Jesus says, remove the plank. Then you can properly get the speck out of your brother's eye.
Because you can see clearly.
Now you can see clearly. Because now you're doing it without judgment. Now you're doing it out of love. Now you're doing it because you realize he's got a speck in his eye and you want to get it out instead of saying you're a horrible person for having a speck in your eye when you're like, look, I had a plank. Let me
your
help
speck
you.
Is nothing.
Your speck is right.
It's so much less than my
it's humbling
crap I had to get out.
Right.
Because there's the other thing. If the eye is sick, the whole body is dark. But if the eye is well, then you're full of light.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember that verse, but
if it's dark and light, if your eye is light, if your eye
body
is light,
is full of light,
and really in context of what we're talking about, that was a cliche in Jesus's time for greed. Having a dark eye, what meant you were greedy, and so he's literally saying when you're greedy, your whole body becomes dark.
Your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. When your
right.
eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light.
Right.
But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is full of darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that dark. Wow, that's
great.
The light you think you have. I think I see clearly, but all I see is the plank. And my body is full of darkness.
Well, again,
and I'm Johnny freaking Ringo.
I'm doing this for my family.
Walter White.
I'm making money on other people's pain to give my family a place of rest. No, you're not.
I'm just trying to keep everybody safe.
I'm just trying to keep everybody safe.
I just want to make a little money.
I just want to make a little money, man. It's my time. It's my turn. I deserve this. Instead of realizing that your greatest satisfaction is going to be in fighting for others and not being on yourself. That's a healthy eye. Is it not? It's not about you, Wyatt. It's about them. It's about the town. They're innocent people here.
Yeah.
And you're making money off of, like, what's the first thing that somebody says to Wyatt when he comes into town? The real money's is in the prostitution and then in the gambling and in the drinking. He goes, well, where can I go for that? Like, he's not even like, it's not like he's doing something constructive with his life to make the money, What's the quick end to money? So I can get rich. That's the right enemy. The Bible says, I'm going to misquote this, so you'll have to look it up. He who controls his own soul, it's like you've conquered a city. You're stronger. You're stronger than a man who has conquered a city. In other words, if you can control your own soul, you're stronger than any general who has conquered a city. And that's the first battle. The first battle is within my heart. The first battle is who I am and what I think and exposing my own motivation. And there's only one person who can do that, and that's God. I can't even know my own heart. Paul says, my conscience doesn't condemn me, but I don't trust my conscience. The Spirit has to. I can't put to death the deeds of the flesh by my own knowledge, because all that's going to do is strengthen my own evil. I'm just doing it in my own strength. Paul in Romans says, put to death the deeds of the flesh by the Spirit, because up to myself, I'm going to try to stop doing things that God doesn't care about, or I'm going to continue to justify doing things that God really does care about. This is for my family, God. This is for my family. It's good, but it's really about me, right? I have to do it with that revelation that God's like, you got a big old plank in your eye, dude. Let's work on it. And he's not doing it because he hates us. He's doing it because he loves us, and he wants to get us into that cleansing right place. All right. Did you find it? What does it actually say?
It's Proverbs 16:32. I'm going to use the New King James Version. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city.
He who rules his spirit. One of the fruits of the Spirit is what? Self-control. One of the fruits of the Spirit. Actually, there's only one fruit, but it's part of the fruit. The singular.
It's like
fruit.
a 9-part fruit.
It's a 9. It's got all sorts of. It's got
a
all sorts
nonagon
of
fruit.
But is the Spirit is the fruit of self-control. That's not my self-control. That's the Spirit within me that can help me control my spirit, my anger, my monster that I could.
I kind of quit on that list after love, joy, peace. After that, I'm like, man, it's too much work.
Yeah, but it's all one fruit, man. It all works together. It's like a cell where that has all the mitochondria and it's got all the different parts to it. Like it's all got to work together. But it's spiritual self-control, and it's the last one. Isn't the last one on the list? Spiritual self-control is the last one on the list.
You're making me look up all these Bible verses.
I'm making it. Google, baby, Google.
You got that right.
So that's the right enemy. The right enemy is the enemy within myself, because then I know my motivation. God really cares about our motivation, man. He really cares why we do what we do. He really cares about this. Are you doing it because of love? You can give all you have to the poor, but if you don't do it out of God's love, it means nothing. You can give your body to be burned. You can speak with the tongues of angels and know all the mysteries of heaven. But if you have all the seminary degrees, but if you don't do it in love, it means nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's what's within my heart. That's the main battle. And now I can fight the right enemy in others. Because if it was just people who are bad, he would have fought Doc Holliday.
Because Doc Holliday, nicely done. Because Doc Holliday is not a good guy. I mean, they basically robbed the casino in the opening when we first meet him. Like, it's fine. Like, he's accused of cheating. He's like, oh, we're not friends anymore. That breaks my heart. But they're walking out, and you see Kate, like, take these stacks of money from an entirely different table. It was like, wait, that's not your winnings. That's just house money, literally.
Right? It's just...
And I'm not convinced he's not a cheater. I think he's, as they said, you just won 12 straight hands. That's more than luck. But we need Doc Holliday. We need a friend. I am not saying Jesus is Doc Holliday or Doc Holliday is Jesus. However, he is a friend who is closer than a brother in this movie. That scene where they're getting ready to go to the OK Corral, and he says, and he's like, Doc, this isn't your fight. And that hurts Doc's feelings. He's like, that's a hell of a thing for you to say.
That's probably my favorite line. It's probably, I'm serious. Like, there's so much depth in that line. It says, it's like he's angry that you don't know how much I love you.
Yeah.
And he would never say, I love you. He would never say those words, I love you. even at the end, and they have this great scene. He would never say it. And how many of us have had those friends where we felt that close connection? And it's not because we have a fear of being gay or whatever in our culture, or even
being thought of as gay.
Or being thought of as gay, or we have this lie that we can only be affectionate in a way with women. Like that's the only time we can be affectionate. Like,
which is interesting because the Art of Manliness wrote a column about this several years ago. If you look at old pictures from the Old West, what are the guys doing? Like they're holding hands
or something.
They're like sometimes sitting on a lap. They're just very comfortable being close because that you had to be closer than a brother. You had to have that. You've got my back because you're in hostile territory.
I had to learn some of this when we were in Korea, and I had read up about it enough, so it didn't really shock me. But Korean men, when they are close as friends, will hold hands walking down the street.
Same in Uganda. Yeah.
And so I saw two military guys holding hands, Korean guys. And I'm like, well, but to them, there's nothing sexual in that for them. It was just an expression of friendship. And there was an old guy, I told this story before probably, but there's an old guy, Mr. Song, who broken English. I called him the Korean redneck Yoda. He's broken English, but so wise and so loving and so kind. And I could tell a billion stories about him, but he loved us. He kind of worked as the handyman at school. It was one of his 15 jobs that he had. And he worked as a handyman at the school, at the International Christian School where I worked. And he loved us and gave us a hard time. And a couple years into it, our time there, we were walking down the street together and he reaches over and takes my hand. And I almost broke down crying in the middle of a Korean street because what he was saying is, this American is my brother. He's my friend. And it meant something to me very deeply. And we men want this relationship with other men. That's why we love Lethal Weapon. That's why we love buddy cop movies. That's why we love war movies. That's why we love a lot of these things, is because and let me just say, Jesus did have Doc Holidays. How many of the disciples that he picked as apostles were rough dudes? Simon was a zealot, right? Like these guys were rough dudes. Like James and John were ready to literally destroy a whole town with fire. Let's just kill everybody, right? Like these were not perfect people, but Jesus felt close to them. And he needed them. And he says, these are the ones who are with me through my trials. And John lays, the same John who he had to correct, you don't know what spirit you're of, lays his head on his breast. Like there was intimacy there. And that's why we love this movie, is because even though they're not perfect guys, they stuck around. And we want people like that in our life. We need people like that in our life. And Wyatt would not have survived what had happened in the movie without Doc Holliday. He was always there. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's what we see in what should be the closing scene of the movie. where Wyatt goes after they run through the cowboys and kill them all. Wyatt walks in and sees the priest doing last rites, knowing that his time is short. And this interaction between Doc and Wyatt really sort of symbolizes what they mean to each other.
How are you feeling today, Doc?
I'm dying. How are you?
Pretty much the same.
So now we add self-pity. All lives frail.
All right, Doc. All right, how many cards you want?
I don't want to play anymore.
How many?
Damn, you're the most fallible, stubborn,
deluded, bullheaded man I've ever known in my entire life.
I call. You win.
Yet withal, you're the only human being in my entire life who ever gave me hope. What did you want?
Just to live a normal life.
There's no normal life, White. It's just life. Get on with it.
Don't know how.
Sure you do. Say goodbye to me. Go grab that spirited actress and make her your own. Take that beauty and run. Don't look back. Live every second. Live right up the hill. Live, White. Live for me. Why, if you ever my friend, if you ever had even the slightest feeling for me, leave now. Leave now. Please.
Thanks for always being there, Doc.
And what does he mean by always being there? We see him in the beginning of the movie. He's there when he opens the casino, when they start that. When they go to the OK Corral, he's there. When he begins his rampage across the West to wipe out the Cowboys, he's there. When he's got a one-on-one with Johnny Ringo, Doc Holliday takes his place. No matter where, in this movie, no matter where Wyatt Earp was, Doc was always there. And why was he there?
Doc, short of being dead, what the hell are you doing this for anyway?
Wyatt Earp is my friend.
Yeah, well, I got lots of friends.
I don't.
And I would argue that that guy doesn't have a lot of friends. What guys do you have that you'd show up for when things are going well? When they're in a battle? Even when they're going sort of down a dark road? Are you there for them? Are they there for you? Who will you call at 3 o'clock in the morning when chaos hits? And we need those guys around us, those allies around us as we fight for our own hearts to say, here's the crazy mess that's going on in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And to say, hey man, I'm sorry you're going through that, but we love you.
That's so good. I was just what I was going to say. Like, here's why we need these allies. Like, if you watch the movie, Doc Holliday isn't worshiping Wyatt. It's not hero worship. He gives Wyatt a hard time. Oh no! I'm. If she comes in, I'm just going to ignore her. Okay. Oh yeah. You're an oak or whatever. You know.
Why you are an oak?
You know, like he calls him on his crap, but he's there. That's the kind of that's intimacy. That's the kind of intimacy all guys want. That's why even in the romantic comedies or these action movies where they have the girl, that's the kind of girl they have. That call them on their crap, but won't leave them. Stick around and respect them and fight with them. That's what we want. That's what we want in our guy friends. We want guy friends who know our faults, who know how broken we are at times, and love us anyway. Because one of our fears is that if people really knew us, they wouldn't love us. So then we're not vulnerable, and that means we're isolated and all that stuff. So here's a guy who knows the worst of Wyatt and sticks around. And those are the kind of people that when they do call out the planks in our eyes or the specks in our eyes, like we take it seriously because they do know us.
Yeah.
They know us better than anybody. And they know that if we do whatever we do about the plank, they're still not going to leave.
That's a really important piece. That's our fear, right? We can't be real unless we're afraid that if we are real, they'll leave.
Right.
And so we keep them at distance. But to say to somebody else, hey, dude, no matter what happens, I'm your friend. I'm here. This is what I want. I'm committing to our friendship. Come hell or high water, which is a different Western, I think.
One of them. It's in there somewhere.
But that commitment is what we see with Doc and Wyatt.
Yeah. And that's who the disciples were for Jesus. We're not going to go see Lazarus. Good, because they're trying to kill you in Jerusalem. Which
well, let's go. We'll die with you.
And then when he finally goes, we're going to go see Lazarus. He's asleep. Or actually, he's actually dead, but we're going.
Yeah.
And they said, well, let's go die with him. That is who Doc Holliday was in the movie. All right. If you're in, I'm in. That's a hell of a thing to say to me, Wyatt. You don't know by now that it doesn't matter. He literally picks, by the way, talk about, guy movies, the buddy cop movies are like romantic comedies. He literally picks Wyatt over the woman at one point. Like, I don't know if we see this context, but he's sick and he ends up going like, I'm sorry, you need to go find something else to do. This isn't fair to you. But he doesn't do that with he does that with Wyatt at the very end, where he's like, if you love me, you would.
I don't want you to see me die.
I don't want you to see me like this. So he does kind of do that with Wyatt at the end, but yeah, man, we need those people because that's how we fight the monster within us. Because we're like, well, at least there's one guy or one person or a handful of people. It doesn't have to be many. There's at least one person that knows the monster in me and loves me anyway. That actually gives me strength to fight the monster, right? That actually makes me go, well, I really don't want to be the monster. Now I really want to be a hero. And Wyatt was that for Doc too. And so for Doc, it kept him from becoming Ringo.
Yeah.
Wyatt kept Doc from becoming Ringo, which he could have been. He's like, he reminds me of me. I could have been that guy. Him. Now I hate him. And
Doc got all the best lines.
He did. And so in that last scene is one of my favorite lines too, where he says he's putting Wyatt down and you're this and you're that, or I forget all the things he says. He goes, but you're the only human being that ever gave me hope. And what a thing to say at the end of your life when you're dying and you're the only person who ever gave me hope. And what does Wyatt give him? And by the way, all the stuff that happens, not all, but a lot of the stuff that happens with Wyatt Earp after, like when he wanted to retire, was the stuff he was famous for, by the way. That's a whole other podcast. When he wanted to quit and he didn't, was actually the stuff he was known for, the gunfight at the OK Corral, all that sort of stuff, all the penny stories and stuff. But he had written a book or a little pamphlet or whatever it was. My friend, Doc Holliday. And that should have been the end of the movie. It was I get it. They were trying to give resolution to this whole Dana Delaney, whatever her name, Josephine thing. And they've tried to make it work, but it kind of doesn't to me. But that connection, that intimate connection that he and Doc had, we need people to fight with us. Even Jesus needed people to fight with him. Come and pray with me. Come and pray with me. What are you doing asleep? Can't you stay awake? Even the Son of God, that doesn't make him imperfect. It's actually completion. That's actually a sign that you are of God, that you need other people. Does that make sense? Adam was completely perfect and sinless when God says you need help. It doesn't say less about you. It says that you're more complete, that you accept help. when other people try to give it to you, right?
So the challenge walking out of here is one of two things. One is if you have some men around you, if you have a man, a guy, be willing to be vulnerable and say, hey, here's some of my stuff. Here's the stuff I'm really struggling with. Here's the monster I'm afraid of becoming. And trust them to handle that. Or the other side is commit to somebody who does that and say, hey, no matter what happens, I'll be here. No matter what happens, I'll be here, every Tuesday night or whenever you meet or whatever you do stuff. Hey, if you do this, I'm there with you. Because you're going to need it in the battle to come, so that to help you, remind you who you are, remind you who they are, and to keep you from becoming Johnny Ringo.
Yeah. Amen.
So this has been Paul McDonald and Britt Mooney talking about Tombstone on its 30th anniversary. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
You know Daisy. You know Daisy at all.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?